I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's upcoming friendlies against Canada this Saturday, September 7th, and against New Zealand the following Tuesday. To help me do that, I've invited Kyle Bond to join the show. Kyle is a writer for the Sporting News and has over a decade of experience covering the sport of soccer globally. He also does TV broadcasts for Wake Forest Soccer. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. The summer is over and back into a more regular soccer schedule, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, it's time to. We haven't seen the U.S. play since Copa America, so it's time to move on to that next phase. We're still waiting on Pochettino to be named as the next head coach officially, although as you and I were just talking about, some news came out. I saw Fabrizio Romano just posted something a few hours ago saying everything's on track. Hopefully we could hear something this week if things stay on track. But for now...
Sounds like he'll be at the game in Kansas City too.
That'll be cool.
Yep.
That'll be huge.
My assumption is if that's the case, obviously I don't have any word on this, but if that's the case, it'll be done before that because it would be super awkward to have him there but not have the deal complete. So I have to imagine it'll be announced before that.
Yeah. That'll be nice if that happens. We'll look forward to that. In the meantime, Mikey Varas is the interim head coach, for these two friendlies. He's called in a 24-player roster for the two matches, and that's what I want to talk about first. When you took a first look at the roster, what stood out to you the most?
Yeah, so I will give you a little bit of inside info that I haven't really put out on social, but for a little here and abroad exclusive.
Yes.
There was a report that Mauricio Pochettino had influence over the roster, even though he had not signed his contract. From what I've heard, that is not accurate. So Pochettino was not involved in the the roster selection for the September window. So this is all Mikey Varas. And I think there's a couple of things to keep an eye on. Couple of things first, that there are some regulars not on the roster, and each one is different. There's two that stand out. The first one is Anthony Robinson, and Mikey Varas just came right out and said that during the selection. He was like, look, Jedi's been playing with an injury or a knock for over a year now, which is incredible. I think Anthony Robinson is the single most underrated U.S. national team player of the last 5 to 10 years, and he's right up there with DeMarcus Beasley as most underrated U.S. national team players in the modern era, and probably a top 5 most underrated player, if not number 1, in the Premier League. It is astonishing to me, and I say this I feel like every time we come on, but it's astonishing to me that no bigger club has come in for him in a bigger way, because he just continues to perform at a durable level. I mean, the minute numbers he puts up are huge, so it's great that he gets this window off. We know what he is. The U.S. team doesn't need to play with him, especially with Pochettino not in charge, right? Like he doesn't need to learn the system yet. This is a great chance to give him some rest. No worries there. Don't worry about it that he's not on the roster. The guy that does need to worry is Weston McKennie. He's signed a new contract with Juventus, which seemed like an indication that he was going to be part of Thiago Motta's plan. And it appears that he is very much not a part of Thiago Motta's plan. He has got to get minutes there. And it wouldn't be the first time that he's come back and become a useful part for Juventus after appearing to be on the outside. But, yikes. And I think Mikey Varas made it clear, I would expect Weston to be involved in the future. But I think this is just a low-stakes warning sign to Wes. To say, hey, buddy, get it together at the club level. Because if you don't, your U.S. national team appearances haven't been good enough to justify calling you in when you're not playing at the club level. You see Gio Reyna is on the roster. I think Gio has done enough to justify being a part of the U.S. team, even though he's not playing at the club level. And Dortmund have come out and said, we like Gio. He's going to be involved. He might not be a starter weekly, but he's going to be involved. So I'm less worried about Gio because he's performed at the U.S. level even when he's not getting minutes. I'm really worried about Wes.
Yeah, this was the transfer window where I was absolutely sure he was going to move on. You always think it every year. You're like, okay, this is it, and then it does. Then he doesn't move. I thought for sure.
The trouble is it's too early for him to go to MLS, and I think he knows it. That's why that move didn't happen. If he was 30, that move happens. And I will say this one I don't have inside info on, but my guess is that move happens if Wes wanted it. And my guess is he didn't want it, rightly so. It is not the right time for him to go to MLS. He's too good of a player in his prime. MLS is not at that stage where that's a positive move for him, even if it gets him minutes. Should have been more of a market for him in Europe. And the fact that there wasn't, even if he takes a step down, right? Like, even if he goes to a mid to low level Premier League team or a mid to low level La Liga team, he would have done pretty well in La Liga, I think. I don't think he needed to drop a league. He's too good for the championship. I wouldn't take too much stock into his Leeds loan. He's too good for that. And maybe he would have to give up playing in Europe. But that's part of the deal, man. If you're not getting minutes at a European club, you need minutes. So you sacrifice playing in Europe. I think there are places that he probably could have gone if he was willing to, but instead he signed this extension. So my guess, without having any inside info, is that Wes decided to stay at Juventus, not the market decided that Wes stayed at Juventus. And that concerns me.
Yeah, he seems to really want to be there because he keeps giving him a chance, and I do believe he got some more minutes this weekend. I think he subbed on in like the 70th minute or something like that, which is a little bit better. So we'll see. He got out to a slow start last season, came on strong. Hopefully he'll do the same. Let me ask you about Anthony Robinson. You mentioned him and just how important he's become for this U.S. men's national team. I mean, when I look at the starting 11 for the U.S., there's so many question marks across so many different positions. But I think now, do you think Anthony Robinson has joined Christian Pulisic as maybe the only two players that you don't even think about where they're going to be?
100%.
Coming into a match. Is there anybody besides those two that can say that, do you think?
The easy answer is no.
Yeah. Because you never think about, will they start? Will they come into camp? Are they in form? Are they out of form? They're so good, so consistent all the time. I think he's the only one that's kind of reached that echelon.
I think there are two players who could reach that. I think Yunus Musa is on his way. I don't think he's there yet. If he has like a long run of poor form at the club level, then maybe you worry about it. But like, he's been developing and growing. He's still just 21. He's on the right track. Even when he was in poor form at Valencia, he was still playing well for the U.S. national team and getting minutes. So I think he's close. I don't think he's there yet, but he's close. The other guy, if he can freaking stay healthy, is Tyler Adams. But the injuries have removed him from that list entirely because now he has to kind of earn his place back on the roster. But I think those two guys are close, which is what makes the U.S. midfield so tough and why I'm a little worried about Weston is because there are guys like, hint, hint, Johnny Cardoso, who is well on his way to being starter caliber for the U.S. And he has struggled at the national team level at times. He wasn't good in the few minutes he got in the Copa, but I mean, he's getting interest from Tottenham, right? Like, what a weird deal that was, by the way. I've never seen that before in my life. Tottenham basically sold Gio Lo Celso in return for a one-time buyer option at a fixed price next summer for Johnny Cardoso. Johnny's got to improve his passing. If you look at his radar, his defensive numbers are off the charts Frank, off the charts. He's like 95th percentile in every defensive category, and his passing numbers are horrid. So he's got to get his distribution up. If he can improve his distribution, he is a locked-on starter at the 6 for the U.S. national team, and Tyler Adams has work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You talked about that midfield, being stacked. And that's going to be interesting to see, how that plays out in these two friendlies. I agree with you. Musa, I think, has kind of solidified his place, especially in this camp. I fully expect him to unquestionably get one of those starting spots. But what else are you going to be? Who are some other players or positions for the U.S. men's national team you're going to be keeping a really close eye on during these two matches? Who are you especially interested to see?
So there's always interest around the goalkeeper position, as there should be, because there's nobody. I mean, you look at the 4 guys right now. Horvath has struggled at the club level in the past few years and has been mediocre for the U.S. Turner has continued to be awesome for the U.S., but looked a little shaky at times in the Copa. I'm not ready to crucify Turner at the U.S. level, but his club level situation is a mess. Absolute mess. Just like Wes's. And then Schulte was mid at the Olympics. So now you've got Diego Koshin in there. Gaga Slonina has kind of disappeared because he hasn't killed it at the club level and is still really young. Koshin, untested. I mean, a lot of promise, obviously, being a Barcelona youth product. I doubt he'll get playing time in this window, only because I can't see Mikey Varas as an interim manager finding any value in playing an 18-year-old prospect right now. I think the Turner's got to be the guy because he just needs to play. This is a chance to get Turner minutes and then see the other 3 guys in training. I don't think you can afford to sit Turner either of these 2 games, just given the fact that he's not playing at the club level. But it will be interesting to see how he performs. And, even though we're not at training, it will be interesting to watch the goalkeeper position because who's on the roster is a good indication of who's performing in training for the U.S. team. So we'll see. And then the other position that I'm looking at, I'm excited to see Josh Sargent, but that's not where I'm going because he's earned his chance a bunch, and I hope he gets time because he has been incredible at Norwich when healthy. If you look at his numbers are really good, and they're only where they are because he's been injured, not because he's been in and out of form. When he's on the field, he is a guaranteed goal scorer almost for Norwich. They only didn't get promoted through the playoffs. They only tanked in the playoffs because he got hurt. So another guy, if he can stay healthy, I'm really excited to see him. But the other position that I'm intrigued by is center back. Tim Ream is starting to be questionable as an option now because he's showed some cracks in the last few months and now moved to MLS, which shocked me because I still think he was a solid starter at Fulham, but I guess they're going in another direction with a couple of different guys. And I'm speaking of Fulham, I'm really interested to see if Marlon Fossey gets any time. Fossey is a really interesting player. He was a Fulham youth product for a long time. Had loan spells at Shrewsbury and Bolton, and then moved to the Belgian club Standard Liège in 2022, and has been pretty much a locked-on starter for them since. And so when you get a guy who's made 20-plus appearances in 2 straight leagues for a club with, European pedigree like Standard Liège, that's turned some heads, and rightly so. He's a late bloomer. He's 25. But I'm really intrigued to see what a guy like Fossey can bring who has strong European experience. He's played in Europe, I believe. Okay, no, he hasn't. Which is surprising because I think Standard Liège is a pretty common European participant. But he's been a locked-in starter for them in a pretty good league for a few years now. So I'm intrigued to see what he can bring, and I'm a bit surprised that this is his first call-up. So I hope he gets time because this is a position that's losing depth. Ream is on his way out. Carter Vickers just cannot lock down a place, which surprises me because I think he's a good player. Just doesn't have the consistency. And then you've got Austin Trusty, who's in the squad too, and he might see the field. So Richards is the guy, and he's gotten a vote of confidence at Crystal Palace this year because they sold Anderson and thought about selling Gahey. Did he go? I don't think he left.
No, he didn't. He ended up staying.
So vote of confidence for Richards at Crystal Palace. He's the guy, but you've got to get somebody in next to him.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot I just threw at you.
No, that was, I mean, that's just a lot of the positions I'm going to be watching too. I always watch center backs, because I feel like it's so up and down, although it did seem like Berhalter kind of settled on Ream and Richards there at the end, but you have no idea. This is one of those, you have no idea how Pochettino is going to value players.
You can make assumptions, though, based on how he's valued players in the past. Passing ability at center back is huge. And that's why I still think Johnny Cardoso has work to do to get time in this midfield, because Pochettino is all about progression. Progression. And so Richards has work to do there. He's had some bad giveaways. He's been known for some bad giveaways. And his distribution wasn't great when he was playing at the 6 for Crystal Palace. So we'll see who can step up. It's going to be all about distribution.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we keep saying this. You feel like Ream's going to fade out eventually. Strong chance that happening before the 26 World Cup, especially with him maybe going to MLS. I mean, you could always say, hey, he's starting in the Premier League, but you're not going to be able to say that anymore. And so, I would like to see McKenzie or Trusty get some serious playing time, in this window, just to see if they make an impression. And then, I was really, Marlon Fossey was maybe the guy that came out of nowhere.
I should caveat roster. That I do know he's a right back. I said we're watching center back, but he is a full back.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, if I remember from his Fulham days, he was a converted center back. Maybe I'm making that up, but he'll be in the mix anyways in this back line regardless, especially because Dest is hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that I did a podcast a few months ago with a guy who covers the Belgian Pro League, and we were talking about all the Americans that play. And I mean, we didn't talk about Marlon Fossey until like the last 2 or 3 minutes when I was like, hey, here's some other guys. What do you think? I mean, that's how like unaware I am of like Marlon Fossey and what kind of player he is. But what he told me is that when Fossey's good, he's really good. But when he's bad, he's really bad. There's some consistency type of issues, but the fans love him. He can really put on like a show when he's going, but expect some low moments, as well. So I'll be interested to see if we do see an exciting player on the field, but does he potentially like make some mistakes as well?
So I'm just looking at his radar right now and his FBref stats. Ton of carrying the ball. He way prefers to carry the ball forward than pass it forward, which could be a problem, but his passing numbers are abysmal. His tackling numbers aren't good, which is a problem, but he's really good in the air. He's really good on the ball as a dribbler and a carrier, and he's very good at being in passing lanes. And so all of those, again, surprise me that he's a fullback and not a center back, because those are center back traits. But it looks like he also crops up in the penalty area every once in a while, which is a nice little bonus.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the two opponents. I mean, one of which Canada we're very familiar with, the other New Zealand probably not as familiar with. I took a look at Canada's roster that they're bringing. It looks like they're bringing their absolute top roster. Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, everybody. They have Jesse Marsh. We're bringing an interim coach. They made it to the Copa semis. We got knocked out in the group stage. I mean, the U.S., I think, has been considered the stronger team for quite some time. But what do you think about this match this weekend? Are we still expected to beat Canada with all of that going on that I just said?
Yes, slightly. I think these two teams are close. Canada proved a lot to a lot of people in the Copa. Really impressive stuff. Now, how much of that was legal? How much of that was contrived? Who knows? Hard to say. But I think they have a lot to prove still. And I'm sure the U.S. will be on the lookout for their no-fly zone over their practice. But I think the U.S. is still favored. But Canada are a very good team. They're a very organized team. And the thing I think I learned the most about Jesse Marsch in the Copa America was that I've been hand up about this over the last few months. I was very wrong about Jesse Marsch. I think Jesse Marsch is a very good coach. I did not think that his tactical style would translate to the international stage at all. Too high tempo, too high risk, high reward, too open, too disorganized, which is not, that can be a negative comment. That's not meant to be that. It's just a style, right? It's just up tempo. It's just high press. It's high risk. That's just the way he played. He has reformatted his tactics for the international stage to make them less high risk, less high reward, and simpler, right? Which is what you need to be at the international level, because you don't get time to drill these guys week in and week out. Pochettino's going to have to learn that. He is a very meticulous coach when it comes to tactics. Very complicated coach. It took Chelsea 2/3 of last season to get a grip on his tactics. He cannot do that at the international stage. Jesse has adapted very well, and I'm very impressed. And the U.S. will need to be, if they don't play their A game, they will not win. And if they play their A game, they will win. There's a lot of holes in this Canada squad. Center back is one of them. Midfield is sort of in transition. Their midfield is good, but it hinges heavily on Eustachio. If Eustachio is injured or doesn't play, their midfield is suddenly a complete mess. So there's still some real depth issues for Canada, and some positions where they struggle. They have no center backs. But good team and well-coached team. And the U.S. will need to play their best to win that game.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch this matchup, with Jesse Marsch there now. I think when the match was first announced, we were thinking of maybe some tension on the pitch line with him and Berhalter. But
those two guys are too professional to have anything.
Of course. But maybe with the media, they might egg it on a little bit. I still think it's gonna be interesting just to watch Jesse Marsch in this situation. He's gonna be very comfortable with. He's gonna know a lot of the U.S. media that's gonna be asking him questions at press conferences. He's obviously still a fan of the U.S. I'm sure he still cheers for the U.S., or at least I would imagine he is. But I mean, it's just going to be kind of interesting to see some of the interactions between, I think, him and the media before, during, and after this match. You mentioned that they're pretty even, right now. And one thing that surprised me when I was looking at the ELO rankings is that Canada has actually passed the U.S. That's how much of a impact the Copa America performance had on those rankings. Is now Canada's 31, U.S. is 32.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you lose to,
it blew me away that it affected that much.
Yeah, when you lose to Panama, that's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about New Zealand, who we don't have as much history with. What do you know about them as an opponent?
Not much. I know that they are ranked, I think, mid-90s by FIFA, so it's obviously a team that the U.S. should beat. I don't think there's any questions about that. They have Chris Wood, who's a very good player up front. The question is getting him service, because there aren't many other guys that play in Europe that are up to the caliber that the U.S. players would be used to playing. There's one player that folks may want to get to know. He's not playing a ton right now in Europe, but left back Liberato Cacace, I think is how you say it. He plays for Empoli in Serie A, and is a pretty good player. Otherwise, it's a piecemeal team. So I think this team has had better days or better moments where they've had more recognizable players. But that does not mean they can't put on a performance, right? Like, you still have guys playing at clubs in England, like lower tier clubs in England. A couple of guys playing in Greece or Austria or the Netherlands. So there's a couple MLS guys, especially along the defensive line. You've got Bill Tuiloma, who plays for Charlotte FC and has been in a couple of different places in MLS. So decent team. I would hesitate to say it's a quality team. It's probably one in transition a bit, but not a team that couldn't get a result if the U.S. plays poorly.
Yeah. Yeah, they're 94 FIFA in FIFA, 65th in the ELO rankings. I think you did a good job of summarizing their player pool. They do have 3 players in Europe's top 5 leagues. You mentioned Chris Wood and Liberato Cacace. There's also Ben Old, who plays in Ligue 1. In terms of like their historical performance, the last 3 World Cup cycles, they've made it to the Interconfederation playoffs and lost. So it's like they almost always win the Oceania region, but then they can't win that Interconfederation game to make it into the World Cup. So yeah, this is definitely a team that the U.S. should beat. I can't imagine New Zealand's a team that's going to come out and score many goals. But if the U.S. isn't on, perhaps you could look at like a 0-0 draw or like a 1-0 game, something like that. I mean, that kind of leads me to my kind of last thing I want to ask you about is with, like you said, doesn't seem like Pochettino had much of an influence on this roster. We know these are going to be the only games Mikey Varas, coaches, and then rumors are he's out of here to be San Diego's coach. How important do you think these matches are, and how would you define success, for this window for the U.S. men's national team?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I don't think they're that important, and that sucks because they would be important if Pochettino was the head coach, and I think they've wasted a window. I felt very strongly last time they went through a coaching search right after the World Cup that they needed to take their time. That was a really important one. There's no time now. And they had their guy, and it just dragged. I don't know whose fault that is. I don't know how hard they were working to hash that all out. I don't know, if they're working 12 hours around the clock or if they're just getting lunch once a week and working it out. I don't know. But this feels like a complete waste. I don't know what they have to gain in this window. I don't know what... losing to Canada would stink because it would feel like a step back. But would beating Canada mean anything? I don't know. Would New Zealand mean anything? I don't know. Maybe Pochettino is giving instructions to Mikey Varas about how he wants to play tactically and starting to drill these players on that. But if he's not there, how much can you really do? It feels like a waste that these games don't mean much. Or maybe not that they don't mean much, but there's very little to gain. And that is a bummer, and I don't like it. And I feel like I like giving confederations, I like giving national teams, I like giving clubs the benefit of the doubt when we don't know what's going on, right? Like none of us are privy to how the negotiations with Chelsea and Pochettino went. They could have been working 12 hours a day nonstop to try and hash this stuff out. There could be a ton of legal jargon to sort through. There could be a lot of lawyers involved. I don't know. So they could have done their best. Whether they did their best or they didn't do their best, the fact of the matter is Pochettino's not coaching these 2 games, and that's a waste. And I don't know what the amount to gain in these 2 matches is so little. I can't help but feel like this is a pretty big missed opportunity.
Yeah. I think there's, I'm going to give you 3 things that would make me happy. I would feel good about this window if these 3 things happen. Number 1 is if Pochettino, if it's official by Saturday and we see him at Kansas City, kind of in the press box somewhere viewing the game, I'll be happy. Number 2 is if some of these if one of these like newer players like a Marlon Fossey, or maybe one of the young goalkeepers or somebody just does something to give us a little bit of like excitement or hope for one of these new guys coming in, even if it's just a glimpse, I'd be happy about that. And then if we win against Canada, I see what you're saying. There's not a lot to gain. It's not like we're going to feel amazing if we beat Canada, but it's going to feel disappointing if we lose because they are a rival. They're becoming almost as big of a rival as Mexico is. There's never going to be that history there, but in terms of like the top teams, they're a rival that you just want to kind of stay on top of.
You can't have history without building history, I don't want to lose that game. So they're building history.
Yeah, that's true. So that's some things. I think if those things happened, I'd walk away feeling pretty good, pretty hopeful for October, and then just can't wait to see what the roster looks like in October, because you'll start to see what Pochettino values, what's important to him, and then we can kind of get on with this official 2026 World Cup preparation.
I think the players that have the most to gain from these 2 matches are the forwards, because there's a lot of guys up there who need to convert club form to international form. Fuller and Balogun has got to get it to click with the national team. We saw glimpses of that at the Copa America or just before it. Got to keep that momentum moving. And then Haji Wright and Josh Sargent are both playing extremely well with their clubs, and converting that to the U.S. national team would be really, really, really important. I think those 3 guys have the most to gain from these 3 games. If you look at the roster, other guys, Gio Reyna, if he crushes it, okay, he's been crushing it for the national team. Do it at the club level. Until he does it at the club level, there's going to be a cap on what he can bring. Same with Ricardo Pepi. Defenders don't really gain a lot from games. They just sort of exist, and that's fine. That's just the nature of the position. But those 3 strikers, I think, or forwards, have a lot to gain in this window.
Yeah, I agree. Can't wait to see if one of those 3 can step up. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is @the_bonfire, and also to your work at the Sporting News. Thanks again so much for joining the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Love it. Let's go get them. I know that there's not a lot to gain, but these games are always exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting to see them back out on the field again. And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or the follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X @FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.